What's going on, dude?
Well, as of today, we are 8 days away when we are recording this from the NFL draft. So I am equal parts that look on your face, and I'm equal parts. Oh my God, I don't know. Do I have everything? Is everything done? Oh my God,
Yeah.
I have, and it's such a moving target because you have no idea what you get in round 6 and 7. Did I study the right guys? Have I looked at the right guys? I mean, it's round 7. I mean, and then of course there's always that thought of hopefully during this draft process I didn't say anything bad about anybody in the Texans draft because that's probably happened before.
That
So
has happened before.
but you know me, when it comes to draft stuff, I try and lean more towards the positive aspect of what these guys can do as opposed to, well, he's got to do this, he's got to do that, he's not this, and he trips over himself, and he's got a 15 syllable last name that nobody can. So I try and lean more towards the positive part for these guys.
Yes. You've seen the tape. You've covered these guys for years. So yeah, you focus on the right things. Just want to give you a shout out, by the way, on the hoodie you're wearing. I like that. Can you kind of model that and then kind of do the side thing? It's got the alternate.
You got the
It's got
you got the hoodie. You got the
semi.
you got the bullhead over here.
Alternate bullhead, which I'm a fan.
And then you got the H over here.
Yep.
Now I've also got one that's got the bullhead over on the crest and the H on the arm, and I like that too.
Same coloring?
No, it's actually the H-Town blue one. It's H-Town blue.
Yeah.
And it's not a hoodie.
Oh, okay.
But it's got the bullhead here in black.
Yes, I have that one too.
And then it's got the H over here in black. And it's funny because a lot of times this being my right arm, I like pat that. I don't know, like, and I look down, it's like the H. I don't know. It makes me feel good when I see it. So
I like that one, but I was a dummy and I bought it for like a size too big. So it looks like a tent on me.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know somebody that probably wears a size too big if you'd like to get rid of it.
Okay. I might do that. I wear that, what you're wearing.
Yeah, this one's great.
The gray one. I wear that to the Toros games that I'm coaching, the baseball team.
Oh, yeah, the baseball. Yeah, baseball
Mighty
team.
Toros took a loss last night. It was tough, but still got 2 more games to go, and we're going to rally. We're going to rock and roll and have a great finish. But you're not here for that talk. You're here for draft talk. And we've got lots of draft talk. Last week, John and I did a mock draft simulation.
Mm-hmm.
We went through. We took some players for the Texans, and we made the Texans a better team. Some of you in the comments didn't appreciate that, and that's all right. You're wrong.
What were they upset about? Everybody's upset in comments always.
Not everybody, but some commenters didn't think we took the right choices. But hey, do each their own. That's the draft. That's the beauty of the draft. That's why you're watching this right now.
I would challenge anybody in those comments to come watch film with as much as I've watched. So yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's all good. But what I want to do, I want to get in the DeLorean.
Yeah.
I want to go back in time. This is a sink your teeth in the lab, true in the lab experience. Because John and I, we get deep on some stuff and we get weird on some stuff. So we're going to get deep and we're going to get weird and we're going to go back in the weeds. And we've done this kind of before, but we're going to do it a little differently today. But we're going back in time and we're redrafting for the Houston Texans the 2011 NFL draft. The draft that yielded J.J. Watt. Okay? He was the headliner in that.
Okay.
We're going to go back. We'll go back and we'll talk about some of those picks before, but we're going to repick. But, John, let's set the stage. What was going on? The Texans are 5-10 going into the final week of the season.
Yep.
It had been a tough season. The year before, they'd gone 9-7. So 2010, hey, Texans are going to the playoffs. That's the expectation.
Yep. Taking that step.
You got this awesome offense. The defense had some struggles in 2009 early, but then they kind of came around and made some plays here and there. Wasn't a terrific defense, but it was a defense that could do some things. You had Brian Cushing, Rookie of the Year. D'Amico Ryans, fantastic linebacker. 2010 starts, you get out to about a 5-2 start. D'Amico Ryans gets injured and is lost for the year, and from that game on, not a good season for the defense, not a good season for the Texans, but they're 5-2 heading into the last week of the season with really not a whole heck of a lot to play for. Jacksonville is the opponent. They're in your building.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot to play for. They win that game, they're in the playoffs. And it was a 3 p.m. kickoff. Do you remember that, John?
No.
It's a rare 3 p.m. kickoff in week 17. Because remember, we only had
so
16
long
games.
ago, man. Wow.
So the Texans, if they lose, they're probably picking 6th, 7th, around there. They won, however, which pushed them all the way back to pick 11. I don't remember a whole lot of gnashing of teeth, but there were certainly people that were disappointed that they won and sacrificed that great draft position.
Yeah.
So what do? Well, we go to the draft. There's lots of talk about who they might get. Von Miller was a really popular choice going into the Senior Bowl week, and then Von Miller, everyone saw the tape, and then they saw what he did at Senior Bowl. Von Miller was not going to go.
Yeah, he wasn't getting to
past 2 or 3.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen.
He was the second pick overall.
Yep.
So let's do a little screen sharing here where the Texans are picking. You see these names that have come off the board. And now the Texans at 11. I think we know. We're going to go with J.J. Watt again. You cool with that? The greatest player.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Did franchise history. So, yeah, no-brainer there. Texans going to take J.J. Watt.
I think what's interesting there is, thinking back, like obviously sitting here on April 16, 2025, 14 years after the fact, we can definitely say, oh, it's no-brainer. But not at the time. At the time, people at the draft party, obviously it's, this long-held story. I wasn't there at the draft party because I was doing a national draft show. And so I remember when JJ was picked, I was excited because my parents are Wisconsinites. I mean, I was born in Wisconsin. I got here when I was 11. So JJ and I follow the same path, different bank account, but you get the point. And so when JJ was drafted, I remember I was really excited. My parents and I really wanted JJ here. But the big question was, where was he going to play? Because JJ at Wisconsin was playing outside as a 4-3 defensive end. Could he play? I don't know. He's not going to play outside linebacker in a 3-4, which at the time, you got to remember, 4-3, 3-4, they were a little bit more different. There was more variance in those. 4-3 defensive ends a lot of times couldn't play in a 3-4 outside linebacker. They a lot of times had to move inside and play, a 4-eye, which is inside the tackle, or play a 5 technique just outside the tackle, and there would be a heavy end, all that kind of stuff. And so I remember during a break of our show, I ran down and I joined our local draft show, and they asked me about Watt. And I remember saying, I love Watt. I love him as a player. I just don't know how they're going to use him. I'm not sure about that. I said, but I'll be very clear. I very much like J.J. Watt being in Houston. And J.J. ends up being a guy that when he comes for his draft press conference the following day, when he walks in, you just realize, damn. I remember Wade Phillips going, look at the size of his hands. And his hands were enormous.
Biggest hands in the draft.
And I was like, okay, we drafted this dude for his hand. And I knew full well why that we didn't do that. But I think what
Wade also brought up the 3-cone drill.
Yeah.
And how Watt had the fastest.
Right. And you've often referred to him as a jungle cat.
He's a jungle cat.
The way that
J.J. Watt is a jungle cat. Yeah.
And I think we've missed all that. But what I think is interesting, if you go back and you look at J.J. when he got here in 2011, he kind of looked like a lighter defensive tackle. Like he just was he's kind of thick. I don't know the right way of saying this because I don't want it to sound mean, but he didn't look like a defensive end. Mm-hmm. But then he just started going gangbusters in the weight room. And then you looked at him and go, okay, I could see him as playing a 4-3 defensive end. And that's eventually what he ended up doing. The thought in my mind of, okay, how does he kind of fit? You already have Mario Williams. You drafted Connor Barwin.
Well,
how are you going to put all this together?
That was a minor news item. Mario Williams is going to play outside linebacker,
right?
And that had not been discussed or talked about really publicly. But then the Texans take J.J. Watt, and that comes out.
And so one of the things that I kept, I want to say I referenced, but I know in my draft spiel after J.J. was drafted, I remember saying, in 2004. The Texans drafted Travis Johnson, and Travis was not a 4-3 defensive tackle, which the Texans were running at that time. Oh, no, the Texans were running 3-4. He's a 4-3 defensive tackle, not a 3-4. He's not a nose tackle, and he's not really a 3-4 defensive end. I don't know if this fit is right. So I remember saying—
Travis will tell you about that when he got picked there in 05.
Exactly. And I told that to Travis, and he was like, yeah, you had it dead on. And so I was like, I don't want that happening to JJ, but I know him having watched almost every Wisconsin game. I know this dude, and I know his backstory. I know people in Houston are going to really like him eventually, but it's going to take a little while to kind of prove it. I like this pick at 11. But here's the other thing.
Well, also, Wade Phillips was always he himself was always very upfront about, people say that my defenses have to have this type of nose tackle.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. I had this guy
Yeah,
here
yeah.
and I had this guy here.
Right.
Sean Cody was worried.
Right.
He's like, Sean, when they hired Wade Phillips, Sean kind of thought, I'm a goner,
That's right. Because, yeah, exactly. You think of 3-4 nose, you think of Reeder and you think of Wilfork.
Right.
And, you don't think of a guy like Sean Cody, but that's not the way that Wade ran a defense. But I think the other thing to keep in mind here is when you look at, as you put up that screen, 1 through 16, every non-quarterback went to at least a Pro Bowl except for one non-quarterback. And that was the guy a lot of people wanted at 11. That was Nick Fairley from out of Auburn.
Yeah.
Fairley was coming off a tremendous season at Auburn. And I had the Lombardi Award breakfast that I did, and I did a little either or. I did an interview with each of the guys, and I got to Fairley, and I was doing either or, and I was like, okay, your professional home, Dallas or Houston? And he just had this kind of look, he winked at me, he's like, oh, And so in my mind, and I thought that Fairley would have been a pretty good fit for this particular defense. But I loved Watt as a player, and I loved him being from Wisconsin, and I thought in the end, it ended up being that way. And Fairley never got to that Pro Bowl level.
Yeah.
He ended up having some decent seasons. He was not a bad player, but he was not Jake Locker, Blaine Gabbert, et cetera. So
right.
I feel like when revisionist history, when we look back, I feel like there were still some questions about JJ because of how he was going to fit in Wade's defense. And I think that goes to, both Wade Phillips and Romeo Crennel, that they were quote unquote 3-4 guys
who were adaptable though.
But they were adaptable and they
flexible
took this, this moldable clay and helped turn him in. And JJ has never shied away from saying that. He was like, Romeo Crennel and Wade Phillips, they made my career. Yeah, absolutely. And letting JJ get to a point where it was, you play, we'll adapt, and the defense will be better for it. And it really was.
It sure was. So JJ Watt is the pick there at 1. No, nothing crazy going on. So let's talk and look at what happens in round 2, because this is where things get interesting.
Yeah.
So the Texans had a pick in the second round, but during the draft, they traded for another pick. The first one they take is on Brooks Reed. Brooks Reed, good player.
Mm-hmm.
But look at some of the guys available. You have Pro Bowl tight end Kyle Rudolph, who comes off the board a little bit later.
Literally the pick after him.
Uh-huh.
Pick after Brooks Reed.
Rodney Hudson, nice guard from Florida State, goes to the Chiefs. Shane Vereen, he's in the building here now with the Houston Texans, a running back. Used to be a
second rounder.
Patriot. Yep, he was really good. Did a lot of good things. Oh, Randall Cobb down there at the bottom. Brandon Harris is the Texans' second pick. They traded with New England, so they get the corner from Miami. But look there at the very bottom of very top of the third round. Justin Houston is the name I'm circling. Now, friends, if you aren't familiar with Justin Houston, he wound up having a pretty darn good career, getting a lot of sacks.
He did.
Justin Houston had a bit better career than Brooks Reed. So, John, what do you say? Want to take Justin Houston there?
Now, let's use that revisionist history in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Houston had a tremendous career. Justin Houston was an incredible prospect. But he's there, round 3, pick number 70, because there were a lot of concerns about Houston off the field when he was coming out of college. A ton. And I know how the Texans thought back in 2011 that I don't want to say they were allergic to some of those, but you've heard Nick Caserio say we don't draft choir boys. And it wasn't as if the Texans were all, drafted choir boys, but they avoided guys that they felt like had issues. And it was pretty well known in the NFL about the issues that Justin Houston had off the field. Now, once he got to the NFL, all of that disappeared. I mean, he turned into and became a model citizen, was always held in high regard, and became one of the better pass rushers. So if you bank on that happening in Houston, there's no question the pick of Brooks Reed. Although Brooks had a few years of some good things, Justin Houston would have done it opposite J.J. Watt. Can you imagine if you would have had Mario Williams, J.J. Watt, Justin Houston, and Connor Barwin all healthy on a defense in 2011? It was already Bulls on parade, but my God.
Well, let me ask you
what
this.
would you have had with Justin Houston?
Let's do a little quiz here. How many sacks did J.J. Watt have in 2014?
2014?
The Comet year,
was
where
20
he was
plus.
a Comet.
Yeah.
He had 20 plus. Up in Kansas City, Justin Houston had 22 sacks. Can you imagine that?
Exactly.
45 sacks combined, just two dudes.
And I think what ends up being interesting here is now you start, it's the butterfly effect. Because if you end up drafting Justin Houston, more than likely in 2012, you don't draft Whitney Merciless. So there are a number of ways to look at it, but I think if you want to get better even faster than you did, I think Justin Houston would have been the right pick there.
Okay. Now, do you want to take another second rounder, or do you just want to rock in the third and not make that trade with the Patriots? Because if you don't make the trade with the Patriots, you're picking 73 overall. They wound up taking Stephen Ridley.
Right.
You got Ryan Mallett waiting there.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. You got a name that got familiar to Texans fans pretty quickly. Jarrell Casey, a few picks after him. You want to take a defensive tackle, and you want to just like strengthen a strength that was kind of a weakness the year before.
I think that would have been tough because you've already you've still got Mario under contract, and I think the defense was so bad. I think people would have been okay with it. You already went Watt, Brooks, Reed, but now you're going Watt, Justin Houston, Jarrell Casey. Like, man, is that a little bit too much to put into the defensive line? I think even now I look at it and think, even though as much as I love Casey, that might have been a bit much at that point. But just going back, Randall Cobb would have been on the board if we'd stayed at 60. Would we have been better off drafting Randall Cobb at 60 instead of Brandon Harris and then going on down to whatever our next pick would have been? I think that to me would end up being, let's balance this out. Even though the offense in 09 going into 10 going into 11, you're like, okay, this offense is pretty damn good, man. We don't need a lot offensively. But Randall Cobb would have given them something a little different on that offense in 2011 that maybe they didn't have.
But I think he's gone at that point, though, right?
Well, if we had stayed with the trade at 60, we could have gotten Randall Cobb.
Let's do it then. Let's go get Randall Cobb.
Let's do that. Let's trade and then go get Randall Cobb. How about that?
Likely
2011 Randall Cobb, not the 2020 Cobb that we got.
But it likely takes us away from taking KJ Wright in the third round. Would you like a KJ Wright at linebacker?
I even think in 2011, I don't know that I would have felt that. I think once Cushing went down, I would have been like, we need it. Man, would I rather have had? I think I would have had, if I would have ranked them, ironically, I would have probably gone trade to get Cobb, then KJ Wright, then Jarrell Casey, because I feel like we really bolster our defensive line. Like, I don't know if you can ever have enough on the defensive line.
Okay.
But I feel like that's the way that I would have gone.
So we're going to go, but we're going to stick with 2. We're going to go with Randall Cobb.
Yeah, let's stick with 2 and go with Randall Cobb.
All right.
Although you're killing me with this KJ Wright.
I know. Think about it.
Dang, he was at the beginning of the 4th round.
He plays forever, Jude.
I wonder how much. I can't remember how much we gave up to move up to 60.
I'll show you.
Let me see. Oh, here it is.
Yeah, we go.
New England traded this selection to Houston for Houston's 3rd, which was 73 overall, and 5th round selections.
And that was the year the Texans had about 13 5th-rounders. You take Shiloh, you take T.J. Yates, you take somebody else too.
I think I would stick with that trade.
Okay.
I think I would stick with that trade.
So but that takes the Texans out of the 3rd round. So we're going to go all the way down to the 4th and look at what is going on. The 4th. Rashad Carmichael, corner from Virginia Tech.
Who did that not turn out well?
Okay. Julius Thomas made a Pro Bowl at tight end with the Broncos. He was pretty good. Anthony Sherman, Pro Bowl fullback in the 5th round. Now you're into this 5th round, and this is where some fascinating names come off the board. And that's the name right there that's in yellow that doesn't get past Houston.
Richard Sherman.
Why not? Let's go. You'll get a lot of heat for at the time taking Richard Sherman in the 4th round, but do you want to just eliminate it and take him?
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. Ironically, remember I talked about that trade with New England?
Mm-hmm.
In staying with that trade with New England, we gave up 138 overall in the 5th round.
Right.
That pick turned into Marcus Cannon, the tackle from TCU.
Wow.
And so that's what the Patriots were able to. The Patriots took Mallett, if I remember right. No, they took Ridley, Stephen Ridley, and Marcus Cannon with 2 picks that we traded up to go get Brandon Harris. That didn't work out.
Didn't work out.
You know, look, sometimes trades don't work out. That was one of them.
But think about what you'd seen the year before. You had the worst pass defense since the NFL AFL merger.
Yeah, it was
so
bad. You had. I don't argue with the theory.
You understand what Rick was doing.
No doubt at all. And that's why I think you could have said, yeah, this Richard Sherman character is a guy that would fit for us really, really well. I think that would have been. What pick would we have been with that? That would have been in the 4th round.
Yeah, that was.
That was pick 127.
Yeah.
And Sherman ends up going. Not Anthony Sherman, Richard Sherman. He goes 27 picks later. I mean, look, when you get to day 3. I think in this one it was day 2, but either way, there's not that 27 spots. That's not a whole heck of a lot, to be honest with you. So I think Sherman would have definitely been the pick at that our pick instead of Rock Carmichael. Yeah.
Okay, so now we go into the 5th round, and who's there? So the Texans are picking
152.
First pick. It's 152. TJ Yates, I'm not changing that.
Not changing
that because
love TJ.
We've gotten Richard Sherman, so we're going to go with TJ Yates at 152.
We're not changing that.
The next one zips along and comes to you at. Why is this taking so long, John? You're in the 6th round. Oh, I thought we had. Okay. Anyways, no, you're in the 7th round.
All right, 5th round, 144.
144, excuse me.
So TJ was taken
152.
152.
How do we miss Shiloh Ko? Okay.
Yeah. We'll take Yates at 152.
Right.
Let's go to 144.
Right.
Now, there's a Houston homeboy that I would have loved, and I don't know that he had the greatest career of all, but had Jacquizz Rodgers been drafted at 144, I would have gone nuts. Now, we wouldn't have because the year before we had taken Ben Tate. He'd gotten hurt. He was a 2nd-round pick. No way we're drafting a running back at that particular point. So I think, even because you look at the running backs in front of you, Jacquizz Rodgers, Dion Lewis. Those are 2 really, really good players. But I present to you, if we're, just say, okay, we needed a safety. Well, we've already taken Richard Sherman. The next safety that's taken is by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a guy named Ahmad Black.
Okay.
And I don't know, that's a great pick.
Dejon Gomez, though.
Yeah, he didn't turn into anything. He was kind of, blah is the right way of saying it. Black wasn't great in the NFL either.
Yeah.
And so I actually think Shiloh might have been if I remember correctly, I think Shiloh might have been
Shiloh was a special team
those
captain
3 safeties.
for a year. Yeah.
But if we're looking at guys that we could have taken as we go on the list, we're going to take TJ Yates, but there's a Tyrod Taylor down the road.
There's also Jason Kelce, a center down the road.
There is a Jason Kelce at center. Oh my God!
So I think we got to take him, man.
I think you have to take him.
So let's do it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's.
I mean, Chris Myers would not have been happy with that.
But no.
But wait, what year did we trade for Chris Myers? I can't remember.
Chris Myers was 07-ish.
Okay, all right.
So Chris was in the middle of that great run of offensive linemen. I think he,
So 144.
He's going to look at his competition, but it's competition.
Yeah. So instead of at 144, Shiloh Ko, we're going to go Jason Kelce, the diminutive center out of the University of Cincinnati. I like it.
And then we'll also go in the 5th with
one TJ Yates, who, when you look back, they used to have these things called throwing core. They just needed arms, throwing quarterbacks at the combine. And it basically was to throw to all the defensive backs and throw to the receivers and throw to the running backs so that the guys that were there, like the Cam Newtons and the Gabberts and all those Christian Ponders of the world, didn't hurt their arms. TJ had to go and sling it. And out of that, he ends up being one of the – it would be interesting to look at his draft. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. Because you look for our next pick.
TJ Yates, well, I want to add on to this TJ Yates thing. TJ Yates now at the combine, when we see him at the combine, we talk with him every year.
We do.
He's an assistant coach with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yes.
We spend about 10 minutes talking with him. Outside Radio Row, it's always a good time. And he was a folk hero.
And he's a folk hero.
Late
You're
November,
exactly right.
December of 11, January 12.
Folk hero,
Man.
Folk hero. You're exactly
that
right.
Off season. God bless TJ Yates. Okay, so we're into the later rounds now. The Texans have picked up their picks in the 5th. I feel like I'm missing something in the 5th. Am I missing something? Weren't there 3 5ths? This is great radio, isn't it, friends?
No. In fact,
they only took 2, huh?
In fact, we don't pick again until the 7th round, pick 214.
Okay. So
that's the next pick.
7th round, 214. We're going down to it. And look at what's available. Now, this is where you got to remember, you take Derek Newton there, and then you have the final pick of the 7th round, I believe. Maybe that's what I was messing. Yeah, you have the final pick, Mr. Irrelevant of the 7th round.
That's right.
2
picks in the 7th.
Cheto Zulu. But you take Derek Newton. Derek Newton was a really good right tackle for you. He started a lot of games.
Stay with Derek Newton.
Let's stay with Derek Newton. And then for the final pick, Mr. Irrelevant, Cheto did not play with the Texans.
No.
But look at all these names. Great kicker there in Dan Bailey. Great slot corner, one of the best slot corners of all time, Chris Harris Jr.
Yeah.
A phenomenal player for Wade Phillips. I
mean, hell, you signed Brian Bremen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you even draft him. But, I mean, you got him. So, I mean, there's nothing.
But, man, after what we saw the year before in the secondary, I'm kind of tempted. I'm not kind of tempted. I want Chris Harris Jr., wouldn't you?
I would think that would be something you would do.
Yeah.
You end up with Richard Sherman and Chris Harris Jr. to go with
Kareem
and then you bring it. Now, here's the other thing. Do you end up bringing it, J-Joe? Because
absolutely you do.
At this point, if you remember, there's the lockout.
It's not, and nothing's.
So J-Joe was not a Texan. Now free agents are now because they do free agency before the draft. But you would not have had J-Joe. My hope is that they still would have gone in that direction.
I don't think there's any chance they were going to go into the season after what they'd done the previous year, starting a rookie Kareem Jackson and a second-year Glover Quinn. I don't think there's any chance they were going to not add a veteran.
And to that point, they traded up in the 2nd round to get Brandon Harris, and they drafted Rock Carmichael. So we've only drafted Richard Sherman and Chris Harris Jr. I still think if you'd had J-Joe outside. Here's a couple. There's so many domino effects to this. You draft Sherman. He eventually plays outside. That pushes Glover to safety. Then you sign J-Joe. He plays the other corner. You draft Chris Harris Jr. He plays the slot. That moves Kareem Jackson to safety. So your safeties are now Kareem and Glover. And then that's your 5-some back there in what you have with Glover and Kareem at safety. And then the 3 guys that you have, Richard Sherman, J-Joe, and Chris Harris Jr., that would have been a completely revamped secondary. Now, you end up with what you had, or what you ended up with was J-Joe, Kareem, Bryce McCain inside, and your 2 safeties of Quentin Demps and Daniel Manning. That secondary is much improved over 2010. I don't think there's any question
Troy Nolan
about that.
played a lot of safety.
Much improved. But I think that Chris Harris Jr. would have been a bit of an upgrade from Bryce, even though I thought for a couple of years Bryce played that nickel very, very well.
Yeah.
But I think Chris Harris Jr. would have been a severe, severe upgrade from that position. And to me, the other thing you get out of that is you move Kareem Jackson to what I think is his natural position. I think had Kareem Jackson moved back to safety in 2011 or even 2014 when they flirted with
He's a Pro Bowler.
I think he is a Pro Bowler within 4 years, or less.
Totally.
He would have been a Pro Bowler. He would have been a menace back there. He would have been the perfect fit back there. So I think Chris Harris Jr. in the 7th round is good.
So look at this draft. You take J.J. Watt first, Justin Houston second round, excuse me. And right there, you've got one guy with 100-some sacks, another guy with 100-some sacks. Both of them eclipsed the 100-sack mark in their careers. Huge. Randall Cobb, very productive wide receiver for a long time. Nice compliment in there to Andre Johnson and eventually DeAndre Hopkins, although that's a butterfly effect to have for another day. Richard Sherman, a defensive player of the year, one of the best corners of all time. He's going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Jason Kelsey.
Wow.
Man.
Wow.
You're setting up your offensive line for a long time for nice continuity. TJ Yates, folk hero. Never go wrong drafting a folk hero. Good offensive lineman, Derek Newton. And one of the best slot corners, Chris Harris shooter. That's a good draft. Nice
That's
revisionist history draft.
That's as good a revisionist history draft as you can have. That's
and
good.
Let's put some emphasis on that. Revisionist history. Rick Smith, hey,
yes,
great work.
No, I mean, look, we talk about
J.J. Watt. You got J.J. and T.J. Yates. I mean,
you got J.J. Watt
and Brooks Reed. Brooks Reed was a great player.
Brooks Reed was solid from a just looking back historically.
You could have,
yeah, some things could have changed, there's no doubt. But you end up with a folk hero backup quarterback who has engineered maybe the greatest moment in team history.
Mm-hmm.
You have arguably the greatest player in team history. You end up with a really solid outside linebacker in Brooks Reed. And Derek Newton, who ended up being a 7th rounder who started for you and was pretty damn good at tackle. And then when he had to move to guard every now and again, he actually played that pretty well. That, to me, 2011, hopefully years on end, you'll look back and people will probably forget about TJ and Derek Newton. They shouldn't, but they will. And they'll just remember that's the draft that JJ got drafted, and that's enough for them. Hopefully, we've had some drafts in 23. We'll look back at the one at 24, the top 4 guys, and hopefully they turn into players. Then we'll look at 24 with that sort of reverence. 2011 was a damn good draft, as it was. I mean, we obviously took it to a different level because it's revisionist history 14 years later. But Rick did a pretty good job with that draft, I think.
Sure did. It was a fun one.
Yep.
It's fun to do revisionist history because that's what we do here on In the Line.
Yeah.
All
get geeky.
John, love doing this with you.
Yeah, man. That was awesome.
We'll have the big mock draft simulation on Wednesday, the day before the draft next week. It's always going to be fun, and we're going to pick for the Texans, and it's probably going to look nothing like what they actually do. It'll be fun to see 2 weeks from now if any of our picks next Wednesday align with what the actual ones are.
Of course.
So we know what we're doing the next 2 weeks. All right, John, thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. It's the 3 of us. We'll see you in a week. Bye-bye.